We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to This Song Is Yours, the podcast where we dive deep into the art of songwriting, chat with some of the most exciting artists in the world, and explore the stories behind their songs. I'm your host, Simon Fink, and thank you for joining us. Our guest this week on the podcast is Buzzy Lee, the musical project of Sasha Spielberg. Yes, that's Spielberg. Buzzy Lee crafts music that blends haunting melodies with rich indie textures, moving between intimate singer-songwriter folk and moody, atmospheric indie pop. Her lyricism is sincere, introspective, and deeply personal, delivered with a warmth that feels less like a musical performance and more like a close friend sharing something just beneath the surface. Over the last few years, she has released 2 studio albums and collaborated with the likes of Denzel and Nicolas Jaar, quietly building a body of work that feels both thoughtful and emotionally immersive. Last week, she announced her 3rd studio album, Shoulder to Shoulder, which arrives on March 27th, alongside the release of its dreamlike lead single, Bad Company. On today's episode, we are welcoming Sasha Spielberg back to the podcast to talk about the hazy cinematic quality of Bad Company, making Shoulder to Shoulder alongside her husband Harry, her memories of touring Australia with JPEGMAFIA, and how allergies weirdly play into songwriting. Now we want to say a massive thank you to Amy and Alina for their help with today's episode, and remind everyone that the brand new Buzzy Lee record, Shoulder to Shoulder, is out on March 27th. You'll find links in today's show notes on where you can pre-order the album and stay up to date with everything Sasha has coming up next. While you are in the show notes, please make sure you subscribe to This Song Is Yours on whichever podcast app you use, and go and follow us on Instagram and TikTok. We would really love it if you did. It does help us out and it keeps you up to date with new episodes, guests, and everything else that we've got going on. As we mentioned in the last few episodes as well, we also recently relaunched our playlist feature on our website, where you can find curated playlists from your favourite artists and music curators. That is at thissongisyours.com. It's in the show notes. We'll leave it at that. Let's get into it. Here is our conversation with Sasha Spielberg, aka Buzzy Lee. Buzzy Lee, aka Sasha Spielberg. Sasha, hello. How's it going?
Hello. Good. I was just complaining about my allergies.
We were just talking about what I thought was maybe seasonal, but turns out is a year-round.
It is year-round. It is a dust situation. It's year-round. It doesn't stop. So thank you for having me and my allergies.
Of course. I'm curious, and not to look at this from a purely musical or songwriting perspective, but sometimes I know that studios and songwriting kind of spaces sometimes go a little while without. I didn't think this is where the conversation would go today.
I love it. I'm all for it.
Where they're not used for a little while, they might feel homely, but I imagine that there are quite a few that do kick up the allergies, kick up the dust a little bit.
Yes, this would be the greatest sponsored by Zyrtec. So right now I am in LA in the studio. LA studio, it's near impossible to record vocals here because I have year-long allergies. So the LA songs, the songs that we did record here, all are through the TC Helicon. So there is a vocal effect, and that always works. But all the other vocals you hear that have no effect on them are all done in New York. So I really have a hard time recording vocals in Los Angeles because of allergies. So it does relate to the album.
It definitely does. It's funny what you don't kind of think about when you think of an album, and allergies is probably not something is the first thing that comes to mind, but it's definitely a consideration. But
it's the thing that's on my mind every single second. And fun fact, I have used a Zyrtec pill box as a shaker.
See, double reason to get Zyrtec to support and sponsor this episode. We'll reach out to their people post-recording. But up until that point, I want to say firstly, congratulations on the announcement of a brand new record that is coming out later this month, March 27th. We're getting Shoulder to Shoulder, which is the third studio record from you. Congratulations. How are you feeling with this new record about to come out?
I feel so great. I feel so, this was like a real baby of my husband, and we don't have kids, but this is like our first, this is the first thing we've ever really worked on together that's just been truly just us. And we've done a few songs together, but those were produced by someone else. And this is, we started the record, it's been a long journey, but I guess long story short is I started dating him November of 2020 in Los Angeles because he came out just for 2 weeks. He's a tried and true New Yorker. And we started dating and he ended up staying for 5 months. So he had like a carry-on suitcase with 3 different outfits. So I only knew him in like navy, gray, and khaki for 5 months. And then when we got to New York, because he then sort of was like, all right, let's go to my home. And so he kind of took me with him and I moved into his place slowly but surely. And I discovered he has like all these colors that I never knew existed in his palette. So we then for a few years, I mean, we still are, but we've been kind of going between our places in New York and LA. So we've been very bi-coastal. But the record really started in New York when he first brought me back.
What I did hear about this record is that I think without any sense of knowing what project it was for or kind of any pressure to have it for a finished product, that you guys just both started writing songs and kind of seeing where they began with no real intention to go back and review them immediately, to kind of let them sit and settle for a little while.
Yeah, we had a rule. We were not to open the files back up for a year. So they were like a treasure chest. And I don't know why we set this rule, because I think what happens is I like to record something and then I'll spend like an hour the next day kind of listening to it and finding parts that work and don't work. And then I start building the song kind of the day after. What Harry and I did between like the hours of like 9 p.m. and 4 a.m., truly, he's a night owl. I was not. So I stayed on LA time to keep up with him. We would work in between those hours and he was only just starting to learn how to use Pro Tools. And it was just a fun activity where he would let me just record on our MIDI and I would record either bass line or I'd record just a chord progression. And then he would sort of set up the mic and he would have me go over it for hours, coming up with as many melodies that I could think of. And then he'd go to the computer and start listening back to the melodies that night and picking parts that he loved and placing them as like, this is the verse, this is the chorus, this is the bridge, this is the outro. And he built the songs using my chord progressions and melodies that were just sort of thrown together over the course of, 2 hours or 3 hours.
I think that's a really fascinating approach, though, because you're obviously sometimes the brain, when coming up or composing something, can go any which way, and the ability to then turn that into something which you can, I guess, are you relearning if you're then placing it back, or what's the process then of then trying to then form a song that you can actually perform and keep on a record?
I'm so happy you asked this because this is the bane of my existence and it is demoitis. It's a really bad case because I felt that such magic was captured in those very loose vocal interpretations and I wasn't saying words, but then of course, inevitably you have to write words. You don't have to. I chose to. And so I was so perfectionist about capturing the same very loose magic in the collage-like formations of the songs. And I wanted to almost I put so much pressure on myself with vocals every time I record. And so I wanted to almost pretend that there was no microphone. And the best way to do that was by doing it at like 2 a.m. when I was so tired. And then for the real vocal performances that I needed more warm-ups before, we basically compromised to do those at like 5:30 p.m. So we do those before dinner. If they took a lot of like, if I was really singing. But for most of the songs, I wanted it to sound like I was doing absolutely like something like washing the dishes while recording. I wanted it to have that loose feel that the initial recordings had.
There is what is the word? Like it's ethereal, but there is almost like there's a warmth is probably the best word I can use without knowing the proper way to articulate it. Like texture to these songs, to these tracks. I think the single that has come out now that people will be able to listen to when they're listening to this podcast episode is Bad Company. And the best way that I was describing the song to my wife this morning was just like it just kind of gently floats in, and then your voice cuts through beautifully, and then it almost like floats out, almost like a fever dream in a way. You know, and I can imagine that there's if you are recording at the craziest hours of the night, that there's almost an element of that to it, if that makes sense.
I'm so happy you said that. Thank you. It really means a lot. You captured it completely as we intended to make it. I feel like this word is so overused probably now, but liminal and like dreamlike. We did want to be in this space between, and even between going from his place in New York and then my place in LA. And we were just always in this in between, but we were together and we wanted to capture exactly that. And it's like this dusk twilight feeling, or late night into early morning hours, this sort of in between when it almost feels like sleepwalking. So I'm really happy. I mean, I'm so glad it worked.
That's definitely how it is perceived by the listener. I can tell you that. It is, yeah, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous track. I'm curious with working with Harry, and obviously we've had many, many, many famous songwriting couples and musician couples over the years in the history and lexicon of music. We've spoken to quite a few artists, musicians, songwriters on this very podcast about when they've worked with their partners, and there is always varying degrees of success, like any relationship. And obviously it's worked out quite well with this one. Working with Harry, did you find that it helped or hindered the fact that you were also a partnership outside of that musical kind of space? Obviously, there's a level of trust that's involved. Communication is different, possibly better, but also does that then work both positively and negatively?
Yes. In the beginning, like when we were making these treasure chest collage-like songs, it was so easy. And then once I sort of said to him, he had never produced a record before. And I said to him, I want you to produce this record. And he didn't know whether or not he could. He had never done it. He was still learning Pro Tools. He actually was like, are you sure? And I said, yes, I completely trusted him because he had this thing that you can't buy back, which I call the beginner mindset, where you can just never get it back. And so I had this window with Harry. Now he's gotten too good, which is why we capped the record at 10 songs, because he started getting like, then he was like looking at mixing with the masters, and he was reading like tape op. And I'm like, you had a beautiful, beautiful beginner mindset. And now you are like Mr. Gearhead. Mm-hmm. And so we sort of like, but in the beginning, I am an anxious kind of impatient. I can be really impatient, especially with capturing the magic, as silly as that sounds. But I like to, if I come up with a chord progression, I really, I've worked with such amazing producers who are just, they press a button and then I'm all of a sudden in it. And Harry, there was just a learning curve. And so there were times where I was like, okay, wait, I'm going to lose it. And he and I had to have a real sit down at the beginning. And he was like, you are entrusting me. You know that I don't really know what I'm doing. That's going to benefit the record, and that's going to also be a challenge. And we had to really sit down, and I kind of learned to really get slower. because I think I have a really big fear of running out of time, whatever that means. And I am so afraid of losing time and time passing. And I just feel I get really crazy about finishing things kind of fast. Mm-hmm. And this was the slowest process I've ever been a part of. And it was so incredible in the end. So yes, I had like a little bit of a rage attack in the beginning where I was like, can you just like speed up a little? And he looked at me, he's like, I can't. And you know that. And then there was like, and then after that little, my meltdown, my like mini temper tantrum, and we really worked through it. It was really smooth sailing. There was only one other kind of, not fight, but there was like a weird morale depleter that I was responsible for, of course, because when I've made a record in the past, I second guess myself constantly, and I'll be so happy with something in the studio, and then I'll listen to it a week later and be like, oh God, is it good enough? Can I push myself harder? Is this horrible? Am I the worst? Is this like, am I a terrible song? I just start getting really hard on myself. And I was bringing that home to Harry because I have before. When I've gone to, when I've been in a studio, I would come home to him, and that would be a really safe space for me to doubt myself. But because he was so invested in the record, he was my husband, but he was also like the studio. He was the producer. So he didn't really, it was almost like I had to keep the morale high, which he kind of talked to me about. He's like, I will help you through all the doubts, but like we are in this together. And anytime that I'd get like a little just cranky, it's different when I was like, but when I get cranky, that's when he would be like, let's keep the morale high. We're in this together. So those were the two moments, but otherwise it was incredible. I've recorded vocals like with my hand on his shoulder.
I kind of love that though. That it's not just, obviously any album is a beautiful reflection of whichever artist is putting it out at that time and what's going on in their life. But I do love that this is obviously a very special snapshot of the time of you and Harry and these songs, with everything that you've just kind of said in terms of him going through that learning curve, keeping morale high. Is there a song off the record that you're maybe most proud of when you look back at it now and you go, yep, Harry and I really, killed it with that one? Is there a song that maybe stands out as that diamond out of the other tracks?
Okay, so I actually think truly all of them I'm so happy with, which is so unlike me. And I always get a little, I'm like, I hope I don't sound cocky. I'm not trying to be cocky. I'm just really proud of all of them because I can also say it's part Harry's. And anything he does, I brag about. So, but the one that was the most difficult was the first song off the album called I'll Wait. And that was the first song we ever did together. Not even as producer, but the first kind of, I keep calling it a treasure chest, but the first kind of exercise of like, let's turn on the MIDI and turn on the microphone when I first moved to New York. And that was kind of where our first mini little, okay, let's sit down and really talk about this. I was having a really hard time with the chorus. I knew it was not right, but I didn't want to say it because I didn't want to slow down the process and I wanted to just keep moving on. And Harry and I have such similar, it's really weird. We have very similar instincts. And he said out loud the thing that I didn't want to hear, which was like, I don't think this song is working as it is. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want him to say that. And I knew it deep down. And I was like, it's the chorus, right? And he was like, yes. And I then started having one of my like, oh God, what are we going to do? And then, and sometimes I think I get a little like, not lazy, but no, it'll grow on me. I think the chorus will grow on us. And just, I stick with things that I know I can top, but there's just a sort of like, no, we got to keep moving on. Mm-hmm. And that was I'll Wait. We restarted that song. We actually restarted a lot of the songs on the album. That's why each of them, because they were so challenging, that's why I think I'm so proud of them.
I think that's very fair, though. I think that obviously each song presents its own sometimes its own thing to overcome, and whether it's like an easy thing to overcome or a more difficult thing as discussed, I think that then there is a sense of pride when you are able to achieve that final result. So I think that's very fair. Wondering whether you might indulge us. As I said, when people are listening to this episode, the album is going to be out in a few weeks, so they've only had the opportunity to listen to Bad Company. Would you mind talking us through what inspired that track or where it kind of was born from?
Oh, yeah. So I was working on his piano when I first moved in, and he was washing the dishes, and I was just humming the chorus, and he started humming the counter melody or the counterpart, the current that we kept calling it, the current underneath the chorus. And I was sort of like, da, I was going down, and he was like, dum, 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 da, 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 da. And he was just washing the dishes. And we were doing this because it's an open, his place is this loft and it's all open. So we used, the bedroom, we used a C-stand with a quilt attached as like the partition. So, and it was just, so I would go there and that was my little nook. And then I was on the piano. And so kind of everything I wrote, he could hear. Everything, that's also what I think made me so comfortable, was like, I have an idea for a song. I need to go write it. I can't be self-conscious because we share this space and I'm not going to ask him to leave. So I got really used to him just being in the background, and this was the first time he had ever kind of joined in on an idea, and he started humming that current in the chorus, and that's how it came to be. And we took it to Nick Milheiser, he was in Holy Ghost, and he plays with LCD Sound System. Mm-hmm. He's such a talented producer, such a talented player. He's so crucial in the album's inception. And we took that to him. I believe we kept the chord progression I played, and then we kept another little like bass line, and then we brought it back home with us. And then we had friends record remotely. One of my friends, Georgia Lil, who is a doctor and a cellist. It's the coolest. She's literally arts and sciences. She is so talented. She did the strings on Bad Company, which I'm so happy with.
It seems like you've built quite a little community of I want to say like friends and collaborators, people who have added to the album in just these beautiful little ways that never feel like they overshadow, but obviously that you've kind of collected along the way and asked friends to collaborate. I know previously you've collaborated with the likes of Denzel Curry, I believe. I know that there's a long-standing history with JPEGMAFIA, and you've done a number of things with them. When you are looking for certain collaborators, is there like a key trait or something that you're looking for in particular for them to be a good collaborator with yourself in the Buzzy Lee project?
That's such a good question, because I love collaborating so much. And I was in a band with my brother for 10 years. So that was the first real collaboration with music. But before my brother and I joined a band, I was collaborating with Jaar in when we were 18. And so that was actually my first collaboration. And then I was in another little band, and then I was with Theo, and I love collaborating so much. I really love it. And I'm trying to think what the common thread is, because it's like Nico, Peggy, Greta Morgan, who's a really close friend who co-wrote one of the songs on the record called Hot Nights. And she and I have worked before. It's interesting. I'm like, is it a Capricorn thing? No, I don't think it's Capricorn. I think it's my level of comfort, and it's a language. It's just a language. It's just a really interesting language that, God, that can really cross over into any genre. And I've actually never thought about this, which is, I need to figure out the thread. I wonder if you have any ideas. I'm like, I don't know.
To be honest, when I was having a look through the previous collaborators, there wasn't a through line that I could find, other than like, I think the one that I mainly stood out possibly is just like slightly left of center. It was no one that I thought was your direct, like mainstream appealing to a mass commercial audience. It was those people who kind of like to do things a little off kilter, things like hit left of center or whichever way. But that was maybe the thrill that I found.
I think that's completely right, actually. I really like Off Kilter.
Anyone who you'd love to collaborate with? Anyone that's on the list of just wish list, I guess?
Oh, my God. Giorgio Moroder. I would love to do... I would love to collaborate with... I just love movie scores so much. It would be so cool to collaborate with someone... I don't know, a composer. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that would be an incredible thing. I know that we maybe touched on this last time you were on the podcast. We spoke a number of years ago when Spoiled Love came out. And I know it's not a point that we necessarily want to focus on a lot, but I imagine that you know the people who can hook you up with film composers and those score composers. We'll let people put two and two together. I won't even say it. But I imagine that there might be an opportunity there for yourself.
Honestly, I feel like I've never even... I should actually take advantage of that. The fact that I'm like, God, it's such a faraway, distant dream. And then I'm like, why coming home for Sunday night dinners? Yeah, I think that would be very exciting.
Look, fingers crossed. Hopefully someone can make that happen.
Hope it works out.
Yep. We've got our
Maybe
fingers
it's in the stars.
I would love to know, Sasha, with this album coming out at the end of March, can people expect to see you across the US touring this year, playing shows behind it?
Yeah, I'd love to. I also loved coming to Australia. That was fun. I opened for JPEG in Australia, and we did Sydney and Melbourne, and it was so fun. I loved it.
It was incredible to see you down here, and especially with JPEG as well. I think when speaking previously, there hadn't been a tour and we were working out when you were going to come or what it might be with. And that was not on my bingo card that it was with JPEG, but I kind of absolutely love that that's how it eventuated and what ended up happening.
It was perfect. Also, I spent 2 weeks there before the shows even. And because the person who I play, who plays with me live is named Ben Fletcher, an incredible guitarist and dear friend. And he is based in Sydney. So I came out, we thought we had to rehearse for like weeks, and we got to the first rehearsal and we were done in an hour, and and I remember just being like, oh my God, I came too early. I was like, Ben, I might have oopsies. Like I really, but then it was just, I spent 2 weeks in Sydney and I loved it.
That's glad to hear. Any key things, any things you wanted to call out or,
oh God, I got to practice, my accent. I got to practice my kind of like Kiwi. It's kind of Kiwi still. I got to practice my accent. I got very addicted to these donuts. Oh God, now I need to remember. They had a really good matcha latte, and then they had these donuts that were sourdough. Oh my God, what were they called? They were on, I'm going to look this up because it's been a while, but they were incredible. I'll remember.
We will, if we can put them in the show notes of today's podcast episode afterwards.
Okay, perfect.
And also I did forget that you did, when we spoke, you showed us your Australian accent and it was spot on. I completely forgot about that. So I love it.
No, it's gotten so much worse because I haven't practiced in so long, but thank you.
Not at all. It was very good at the time. I'm sure it is not worse. But
no, it's really, I'm not even gonna, I'm like, should I start the engines now? No, I'm not even gonna do it. I'm like kind of thinking, I'm flirting with the idea of getting into it a little, and I'm not gonna do it.
I can hear it almost lingering just at the edge of the conversation, but we're not going to make you fall into that. No, we'll leave that alone for today.
I mean, it's going to come out when it comes out. It's got to come out. It's
going to happen at some point. At some point it will. Sasha, lastly, we usually ask our guests what they are currently listening to for yourself, anything on high rotation at the moment that you're enjoying.
Oh, this is where I'm like, because I'm such a shuffle person. I am such a shuffle. I am listening to the Henry Solomon, that new record just came out that is so good. Ellery Saxel. I think I'm not sure how to pronounce their name, but Henry Solomon and Ellery Saxel I'm listening to it on repeat. And that is an album I'm listening to I'm listening to Always the Kick Inside, Kate Bush. That's always on repeat. And then this album by William Ora called Half Moon Bay.
I absolutely love those. We'll have to check them out once we wrap up today. But thank you very much for sharing those recommendations with us.
Of course.
And thank
it's coming
you.
out.
It's here. It's here.
It's here.
Thank you again for coming onto the podcast and chatting with us. It is always a delight to chat with you. And congrats on Shoulder to Shoulder. It comes out March 27th and the brand new single Bad Company is out now. But Sasha, thank you again for coming to chat.
Thank you so much for having me again.